Let's take a step back in time, back to the early 1970s. PCs were just in their infancy. Computers were communicating with each other, but not a lot yet. And let's say you were involved in a project then, and you wanted to communicate with other people that were also involved in that project. And that project was to connect computers together. Well, you'd have one big problem. And the problem wasn't that you couldn't connect the computers together. The engineers had figured out how to do that. The problem was how to communicate about the computers communicating. In other words, there was no language that was shared by all countries. Say the project spanned across several countries. There was no language that everybody shared so that we could talk about the process of communication between computers. And since there was no language, that was limiting the growth of computers and of computer communication. So in 1980, 63 countries got together. It's called the ISO, the International Standards Organization. And they got together in February of 1980, and they formed a model. And we're going to talk about what that model is. It's called the OSI model. It stands for Open Systems Interconnect. And the reason for the model that they formed is for interconnectivity and for interoperability between systems. But mostly just so that we would have a standard, so that we would understand what we were talking about. When we talked about what was going on with computer communication, people could understand, and therefore we would have a common language to build from. So we're going to discuss each of the levels, each of the layers of the OSI model. There are 7 layers in the OSI model. From the top down, they're application, presentation, session, transport, network, data link, and physical. A good way to remember that is the mnemonic, all people seem to need data processing. You can also remember it from the bottom up. From the bottom up, there's an old way to remember it, which is, please do not throw sausage pizza away. And this has been remembered by network administrators since the 1980s. But we're going to talk about each layer of the model. So we're going to start at the top. We're going to talk about the application layer. The application layer of the OSI model is where the user is. And it's where the applications that the user is using are. But they're not applications like you would think about, like Excel or PowerPoint or Word. They're applications for communication. They're applications that we use on a day-to-day basis, like the World Wide Web and like file transfer protocol when we download files. But they're special types of applications for communication. At the application layer of the OSI model are applications like HTTP, Hypertext Transfer Protocol, which is for web browsing. You should know that HTTP is for the World Wide Web, for web browsing, and you should know that that's port 80. If somebody says HTTP, you should know that's port 80. FTP, File Transfer Protocol. File Transfer Protocol is used for downloading files. Whenever we download files from the internet, we're actually using FTP. Now we may be using HTTP prior to that, but as soon as we click on download, if we look down at the bottom of our browser, we'll see that it has changed to an FTP server. It's finding an FTP server to pull down that information, those files that we're getting. FTP uses 2 different ports. It uses ports 20 and 21. It uses ports 20 for data, and it uses port 21 for actually transferring the files. SMTP, Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, is used for email. And you should know that SMTP is port 25. Somebody says SMTP, you know that's port 25. That's important both for real life as well as for the test. Telnet is used for remote control. Administrators use Telnet for remote control of all different types of servers, routers, and switches. Telnet is port 23. DNS, Domain Name Services, which resolves friendly names to IP addresses so that we don't have to remember IP addresses, uses port 53. So those are the most common examples at the application layer. There are actually many more protocols that work at the application layer, but those are the ones that we should know for the test.